since Season 15 is here, and Riot made some big changes to Kalista, I'm sure at least 2 more people are gonna pick her up. And since she is one of the hardest ADCs to learn, I'm gonna show you what I do to win the lane every time, and so you don't have to suffer 50 games 10% win rate because of Mr. Paint Eater. And even if you do know how to play Kalista, the last 3 tips I got, even really good players miss it. But let's start with more basic stuff. First tip is one of the most important ones, because it's easier to win the lane if you get a kill before even minions spawn. And as we all know, cheese is love, cheese is life, so you should abuse it as much as possible. To do that, you have to know few things. 1. If your jungler asks you to leash, just mute them. And I know it's been years since junglers needed leash, but I'm including it as a special advice for UNE players, because they seem to struggle with that fact very much. 2. You have to tell your support your plan. Just spam ping them where you want them to be, and who to focus. Should be enough. And 3. Don't overextend unless you can kill. You don't need to actually kill enemies to win the lane. And now is the best part. If you manage to poke enemies down like that, you have 2 options. First one, you just look for more openings, and try to kill them. Most of the time it will work and it's gonna be enough to just win the lane. But on a rare occasion that either enemies are actually smart and you can't kill them, or the cheese went wrong and you can't kill enemies without risking, there is one more thing you can actually do. Roaming. Yes, you heard me correctly, just roam with your support level 2 or 3. Most of the time you have plenty of time since the wave was stacked, and it can get you some free kills, or let your mid laner and jungler get a lot of pressure, making it less likely that they die. And it's all because you just shoved the second wave and you know how wave management works. What? You don't? Okay, you better go watch this thing right here after this video, and it's totally not a threat. Now for the next thing everyone should know, is E-reset. This is like the most obvious shit ever, literally core of the Kalista, but apparently some people struggle to remember that, or just picked up Kalista and didn't read what her abilities do. But yes, your E resets when you kill something with it. You can abuse it in 2 ways. First one is simple. If enemy walks up and you want to kill them, prepare a minion, and just use QE to close the range gap, and chase them down. If they are stupid, you don't even have to use Q, but that slow just helps extending the fight and allow you for a really good poke, or even kill. The second thing about E-reset is a bit harder to manage, because you have to actually know what enemy is doing. And you have to position yourself pretty well. What I'm talking about is punishing. If enemy walks up to take CS, you can use that to poke them with attack into E. Yes, it could be a bit more risky, but once you get the hang of it, you basically can bully enemy while they have no idea what's happening. And for the last thing you can do with E-reset. Yes, there is actually more. So you know how first spear deals more damage? That's also the reason why previous tip is so good. But basically, when you are fighting in a wave, sometimes stars align so that a low HP minion is between you and enemy. You just QE for some extra damage and skill solution enemy. Speaking of killing minions with Q, here is another trick to bully enemies. I call it the hedgehog technique. And if you were ever interested in Kalista, you probably know what I'm talking about. All those funny clips of one-shotting enemies just after they came from base. Yes, we know, it's goofy as fuck, but it's not very consistent. The thing is, you can actually do it on a smaller scale to poke enemies who are clueless about your champion. It's not that consistent either, but unlike with Gromp or other big minions, you actually don't lose anything if it doesn't work out. And for the last thing about your core abilities, maxing them. Now most people say to max E every game, some might say Q max is good only if you are going lethality build. But honestly, they are all full of bullshit. You can max Q with on hit build, and E with lethality build, but there has to be a reason for it. Long story short, if you struggle with engaging on the enemies, or if enemies are too strong, you just max Q over E. This way you can poke enemies down from a safe distance, and all they can do is eat your spears until they are so low that any engage kills them. It also helps a lot if your support is average Yuumi player and just AFKs on the lane. And I know I'm talking a lot about early aggression and how to kill enemies. But what happens when you just die to ganks because you are utterly clueless when it comes to jungle tracking? Well, here comes another tip. Use your fucking W. Yes, that's all. Just use your W on jungle camps. Most people don't know how Kalista W works and they will get spotted by it, giving you a heads up on if jungler is around. And even if it doesn't happen, you still use it on camps. It will give you a general idea of where the enemy can be, depending if the camp is dead, just spawning, or if it's up. That lets you know if you can play aggressive, or really aggressive, and if you die, it's purely a skill issue. Now for the last 3 tips. As I mentioned before, not many players use them, including top Kalista players, and the first one is about her passive. So how many times were you chasing enemies and they just escaped? Probably a lot. Well, here is the thing. When Kalista has lower attack speed, she actually stands still for a moment after an attack. And apparently not many people know that, but you can actually kite on her like on normal fucking ADC. Crazy, I know. But really, you can just attack enemy, jump, and then move a little. It helps to close the distance even more, or make the difference between killing and dying. It works until around 1.5 attack speed, but honestly I never bothered to check the actual numbers. Just trust me. For the next tip, I'm gonna come back to the W. Now we know you can use it to track jungle, but it's a lot more versatile than you think. You can actually use it to your advantage on lane, and during fights. For the first one, you just use W on lane if you think enemy is trying to do something funny, like try and kill you, or maybe move to the Drake. It gives you better knowledge over the enemy, and lets you choose your next move a lot better. And the next thing? Well, remember how many times you died because enemy just went into a bush, poked you, went back, and you just couldn't do shit because you didn't see them? Here comes Kalista W. You just use it on enemies before or even during a fight, just so you can avoid losing vision and dying. And for the last tip, that I don't see many people consider, is about level 2. So we all know how you start level 1 in pretty much every game. And what about level 2? Pretty much 99% of players would say to take Q. And that's just sad. Yes, Q is really good on Kalista, but people underestimate her W too much. Especially at level 2. There are 3 reasons why it's worth taking W over Q on level 2. It can be used a lot more often than Q, and without wasting mana. It deals slightly more damage, and it helps you avoid an early gank. And most of the time your support will be able to attack enemies one way or another. They either picked ranged champ and you can just poke enemy, or they picked an engaged champ, and they will be in their faces all the time. Now don't get me wrong, Q level 2 can also be good, but it's only better in situations where neither you or your support can attack enemies, or you have a really hard time engaging on them. Then you can take Q second to help your support catch the enemies. And that's about all you need to know to win your lane. But if you want to know more Kalista mechanics, or want to improve at her, feel free to join my Discord, linky in the description. Thanks, bye.